our book, Living the Church's Song, and I have to say our because it's not mine alone. I'm a member of the North American Academy of Liturgy. A little bit more about that group in a minute. And it was a bunch of scholars from NAL that contributed to this book. We worked on the book actually for, it was nearly finished edited before it had a title. We did not know what to call it. And Paul Westermeyer, in his chapter, we came across the phrase, the church's living song. And we thought, I think that's our title. And then Alan Hummerding, one of our editors, said in good mastering the art of French cooking, gerund form. Let's move the gerund verb up to the front. So we've got Living the Church's Song, and it is a collection of propositions for an ecumenical theology of liturgical music. Now, the North American Academy of Liturgy was formed in 1973, I think its first meeting was, and it's a group of scholars from many different denominations, not all Christian, some Jewish as well, and we meet every January in rotating cities throughout North America. NAL is divided into several different seminar groups that spend a lot of time together and look at particular fields. I'm a member of the liturgical music seminar, and so that explains what we work on. We are practitioners and scholars and teachers and denominational resource folk, so people coming at music from a variety of perspectives and practices as well as denominations. We wanted to create a resource that would make some of our work available to the community outside of NAL, both musical leaders in congregations, possibly seminarians, people who are studying liturgical music. And we wanted to embody the ecumenical openness that we have in our discussions. So we said, why can't we put together an ecumenical theology of liturgical music? Often these volumes come from a Presbyterian perspective or a Catholic perspective. And we said, are there things that we can agree on together? In that work, we turned to Baptism, Eucharist, and Ministry as a guide, a book that I remember reading under Horace Allen during my days at BU. That book is the work of ecumenical scholars who've come together, and there are propositions that are then explained and explored. And we said, that's, I think, what we want to do. Let's see if we can compile a list of propositions that we can all get behind from our various denominations and experiences and practices, and then take turns exploring them. What is the history of each one? How is it played out throughout liturgical history? What happens when it's absent? How can we foster these things in our churches? So that is, in fact, what we did. We came up with 24 propositions. We originally had 24 authors. As happens during edited works, some sort of vanished into the highways and byways, so several of us had to pick up a second chapter. I learned a lot about editing during this process, but I wanted to share with you the propositions since that's at the heart of our work together. So our first collection of propositions had to do with the function of liturgical music. That music is integral to Christian worship, that very rarely can you have worship without music, that music is embodied, that it intensifies the unity of the gathered assembly through the process of making music, that it aids our engagement with word and sacrament and our transformation through word and sacrament, that it functions sacramentally to disclose God's presence among us in the midst of the gathered community, and that it is bi-directional, that it can express our response to God, but also God's initiative to us in the singing and in the other forms of music. That it empowers members to bring all of their emotions into play in worship, and that it forms us both in our faith and our spirituality, and both individually and as a body together. So that gives you just a taste of the authors who worked on that section of the book and those propositions. From looking at the function of liturgical music, we turn to the repertoire of liturgical music, what gets included. And we noted the primacy of scripture, and particularly the Psalms, as a wellspring of Christian congregational song. We noted that musical genre and ritual can work reciprocally certain genres of music seem to function better in certain ritual positions within the liturgy. We noted that the church's music is inherently ecumenical, and it was indeed Paul Westermeyer's chapter from whence we took our title. But we also noted that liturgical music is countercultural too. And we paired various chapters together. So our liturgical music is countercultural, but yet we're also called, no, hang on, let me get these other ones. We're called to music from many times throughout history. So chapter 15, Anthony Ruff's chapter, but we also see music from the here and now that expresses the Spirit's contemporary action. Swihug Lim's chapter 14. We're called to include the music of a variety of times and places. And we see that in chapters 13 and 16, but yet we're also called to include our own music that reflects who we are and our language and our heritage. That's chapter 17. So it was interesting how these chapters sort of paired together and offered different sides of the coin. Finally, we noted the importance of attending to musical style when preparing music for worship. That was Jonathan Haynes' chapter. And the final section of our book looks at who is making this liturgical music. We noted that the primary music maker is the entire gathered community, that is the source of the most important music in liturgical worship. And we compare that to chapter 21, that however choirs, cantors, instrumentalists, soloists, accompanists do exercise a ministerial role to support the work of the community. So those two are paired. Alan Hummerding's chapter tackles a thorny question: what does it mean for music to be of high quality in a congregation? So he dealt with that ancient question. And Daniel Schlorf reminded us that even the ministry of the president, of the celebrant, and people leading in what we don't think of as musical roles, even their leadership does have a musical dimension. Finally, John Waite, who is a denominational resource person for the Lutheran Church, reminded us that part of the role of liturgical musicians is to teach and to lead congregations, to empower that congregation. And Kim Harris took our last chapter over from another author and included a bunch of interviews from various church musicians and composers, noting how the church has a responsibility to nurture the vocation of composers to give us music for future years.